How to get started investing in multifamily property so you can quit your job in 90 days or less, part 2. Wow, what a promise. Well, how are you going to quit your job in 90 days or less investing in apartment buildings? Well, you're going to buy buildings and create enough cash flow that's going to equal what you're earning in your job, and then you can quit that job and become a full-time investor, and then create generational wealth. So, if you recall, in Cog 1, this is part 2 of the series. So we talked about the 3 cogs of multifamily investing. Cog 1, which is, and I describe it as being 3 different cogs, because you have Cog 1 where you're going from the start to an accepted offer, and then you go into Cog 2 where you go from accepted offer to the close, and then you have Cog 3, and once you've closed that deal, you're operating that deal. So Cog 1 and Cog 3 are always moving because you're always looking to get more deals and you're always operating. Cog 2 is the sprint. You want it to be always moving because you always want deals coming in from Cog 1 going into Cog 2, going into Cog 3. But if one of the 3 is going to stop, it's going to be Cog number 2, and you want to get that one ramped up, back up as soon as you can. So Cog 1, getting started to the offer, getting one accepted. Cog 2, offer accepted to close. And Cog 3, operating the property or asset management is a better way of putting that. So let's just do a recap of when we talked about Cog 1 in the last video. By the way, if you like that video, certainly subscribe down below so you can get notified of these videos coming in on a regular basis. We certainly appreciate that because it increases the visibility of the channel. So in Cog 1, we talked about analyzing the deal, how to do it efficiently. We talked about getting deals to actually analyze, so you have some flow coming in, deal flow. We talked about making the offer. I gave you a couple of good negotiating tips on that. Making the offer and then negotiating. And then we talked about the offer accepted moment, which is the, oh shit, I got an accepted offer, which is both glory and fear at the same time when you do your first one. After that, it gets a lot easier. So in Cog 2, what we're going to cover in this video is the accepted offer to the closing and what takes place in between there. So we're going to have out-of-pocket deposit money because your offer is going to be accepted, so there's going to be a requirement of a deposit. You're going to have to do due diligence to make sure that the deal that they say that they're giving you is actually the deal that they're giving you. We're going to talk about raising the funds. We're going to go into the purchase and sale agreement, which is always negotiated in every deal. We're going to talk about getting the senior debt, which is the main loan that you're going to use to take over the property. We're going to talk about getting commitments for additional equity that you may need for the property. If you're not using all of your own cash, which most people don't, you're going to be raising money. So how do we go to an overview of that process? And then we're going to talk about locking in the rate. And then after that, you're at the closing table. So let's go. Let's go into the first one, which is out of money deposit. When you have an accepted offer, you typically have about 48 hours to get the deposit in. Now, sometimes it's the full amount of the deposit, which is, depending on the size of the deal, could be anywhere from 1% to 3% of the purchase price. And sometimes it's just 1% of the purchase price. It's a good faith deposit saying that, yes, the offer is accepted, and now it's binded by, I forget the word for it, but it's binded by this money. All right, so that will be the first thing, and that will be the first time you actually come out of pocket. Now, if the deal doesn't close, and you walk away from the deal during the due diligence period, you'll get that money back. Okay, so let's go to number 2, all right, which is due diligence. Now, typically, there are 3 types of due diligence that you're going to do on a deal. There's financial, there is physical, and then there is legal. Now, we like to dive right into the financial due diligence. Why? Because number 1, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything to verify the numbers. This is basically saying, Mr. Seller, you gave me a set of income statements that you said the property was performing at. Now I need to verify that the property is actually performing at that rate. And if it is, that's great. Now, the 2 reasons we do it. Number 1 is because if a deal is going to fall out, it's going to fall out during financial due diligence in most cases, okay? Because the numbers that the seller said that he had weren't really the numbers. And now the deal doesn't make sense to you. The deal's not going to cash flow properly. So we try to get financial due diligence done immediately, and also it's free. It doesn't cost you anything to do financial due diligence. So the only thing you may have at risk right now is that deposit money, which will come back to you if the financial due diligence doesn't go through. So With the financial due diligence, you're basically taking a look at, let me see if I have any reveals here. No, I don't. So with the financial due diligence, you're basically taking a look at the last couple of years of profit and loss statement. You want to see them side by side, month after month, so you can see what the trends are. Is it trending up? Is it trending down? Are there outliers in there? And what are the reasons for these outliers? And basically, are these the same numbers that I analyzed my deal on? If it is, good. If it isn't, not good. The rent roll is also involved in this. That's a little more technical. But you compare the rent rolls with the profit and loss statement, and that gives you a really good idea of where that property is at. Now, if that comes in and the property is still cash flowing properly after you do your financial due diligence, the next step is physical due diligence. And the reason we don't do physical due diligence first is because it typically costs us $50 a door to get a inspector in the property to do this physical due diligence. So if this is going to fall out because of physical due diligence, well, first of all, financial due diligence, we want to make sure we're not putting any money out. And physical due diligence, it usually doesn't fall out during this period unless the property is just completely different from what you saw when you did a walkthrough or what your team members saw. You know, one of the things that we do here is we teach you on how to invest in emerging markets. So a lot of times, like we're in Boston, you know, and our students are all around the country, and we may have students in Los Angeles that are actually investing in North Carolina, which is a good market, or maybe down in Orlando, Florida, or we may have some people in Chicago that are investing in Texas. All right, one of the mistakes I've seen over the years is that students will get a deal, they'll get all excited about the deals because the numbers work, and they get pictures of the deal, but when they fly down there, right, the deal is nothing like the pictures look like. And they've wasted their money on a plane ticket, they've wasted their time, and it's just not a good thing to do. So you should always be building a team, and a team being your property manager, property inspector, potential attorney that you might be using, but a property management company that will go and take a look at that deal and potentially walk that deal for you prior to you putting in an offer. Or immediately after putting in an offer, certainly before you get on a plane and fly down there. So with physical due diligence, we're taking a look at every unit. The property inspector is going through a series of units, and then they're going to do what's called a survey, one out of every few units. And from there, they're really looking at safety issues, they're looking for structural repairs, and they're looking for things that need to be done immediately. All right, and that's the report that you'll get at the end of that. The bank will get that report as well, but they'll actually send their own property inspector out there, and they'll charge you for that. And then the only time we really retrade on due diligence, physical due diligence, and retrading means renegotiating, and that is if something should have been disclosed prior to you making your offer that wasn't. For instance, if it's a 100-unit property and it's being run by a big chiller system, which basically heats all of the units and gives hot water to all of the units, and that chiller system needs to be replaced. That's like $80,000 to $100,000 to $150,000 item. All right, so that's retradable. If you have structural problems on the property that nobody saw going into it, that's retradable. What's not retradable is typical repairs and maintenance, wear and tear on the property, which you should expect to see. And typically for 50 units or above, actually you can even go 20 units or above, you're really looking at about $400 per door. So you might want to write that down. For typical repairs and maintenance, you want to assume it's going to be about $400 per door when you're putting your offer in. So we go financial, we go physical, and then we do legal due diligence. If it goes over the first two hurdles, very rarely does it actually fall out because of legal due diligence. And if it does, then there was something wrong. There's probably an easement through the property that you didn't expect, and you may have, it may cause problems in the future for your future plans for the property, or a number of different, there's only a few actually, different legal issues that may actually stop the sale of the property. But number one being if they can't give you clear title, which is very rare. But then they'll have time to cure that, to clear that title before the passing. But physical, financial, and legal due diligence are the three types of due diligence to ensure that the property that you think you're getting is actually the property that you're getting when you go to the closing table. So next is raising the funds. So if you're going to put all your money into the deal yourself, that's great. You don't have to raise any funds. It's very rare, actually. And if you understand money at all, if you have that money, then you probably understand money. But there is an opportunity cost with money. So if you're putting a lot of money into your real estate deal, that will prevent you from actually doing multiple real estate deals, because if you put a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, you could control anywhere from 5 to 10 deals instead of all in one type of a thing. But regardless of what you're going to do, let's assume you're going to raise some funds. At this particular point, it's time to start asking your investors to raise their hands. All right, and as we talked about in Cog 1, when are you raising money? You're always raising money for your deals. And it's not that you're asking people to give you money so you can put it in escrow for a deal that you don't have. You're just basically asking people to raise their hand. Hey, this is what I do. When somebody says to you, at some social engagement, what do you do? And you say, oh, I invest in emerging market real estate. And they say, oh, how do you do that? And then if you do that conversation properly, eventually they'll raise their hand and say, hey, I'd be interested to do a deal if you're interested in having me as a partner. You say absolutely, and you put them on your list, and you create a list of investors, potential investors, to do your deal. Now here's the rule, okay? Here is the 50-50 rule. 50% of the people that say they're going to give you money, when you need that money to do a deal, won't give it to you. But the problem is you don't know which 50% it is. So let's say that your goal to do your first deal is $1 million deal. All right, and a general rule of thumb is that you're going to have to raise about 30% of the purchase price of a deal. Okay, that will include the equity from your investors and the closing costs. So if it's $1 million deal, you're going to need to raise $300,000. So if only 50% of the people that raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to be an investor in your deal, are going to give you the money when the deal comes, you actually have to get $600,000 in commitments. See what I mean? Because 50% of that $600,000 isn't going to come through. So if you do it that way, you'll have your $300,000. So remember that. That is the golden rule of raising funds. Also, most people will do what's called a syndication, okay? And you will need a private placement memorandum, or a PPM, to be created by a syndication attorney who you will engage at this time. After the financial due diligence is done, that's when you start engaging people to get other things done, because that's, as I said, the major hurdle. So they'll create the private placement memorandum, all right, and then that pretty much describes how the deal is going to work to your investors. You send that out to the investors, and then you'll open an escrow account. You can go to your local bank, and you'll use the LLC that you're going to buy the property in, and you open the escrow account, and that will be open for the funds to start coming in so you can close that deal. Now, here's the most important thing, all right? Never, ever, 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 ever accept money for one of your deals without a PPM being signed, because that is against the rules of the SEC, and people get in trouble for that. So never accept money until that PPM is signed. And here's another thing about that. If you have accepted money and the PPMs aren't signed, and the attorney that did the private placement memorandum finds out about it, they will disown you as a client. They will fire you as a client. And then when you go to another SEC attorney and explain to them what's going on and why you need to use them, they will not allow you to use them because you broke the rules at the very beginning. So just remember that. That's one of the other golden rules. Never accept money without the private placement memorandum being signed. The other type of a partnership that you may go into is what's called a joint venture partnership. Okay, and a joint venture partnership is just typically a smaller number of investors where everybody shares control of the deal. And a syndication, you control the deal if the paperwork's done properly, and your investors are passive investors in the deal. And that's what you want, by the way. You want total control of the deal. So now, next, we go into the purchase and sale agreement. So you're going to get a local attorney that is going to first read the purchase and sale agreement. Typically, it will come from the seller, and that's what you want because it costs a lot less to get a purchase and sale agreement from a seller than it does to get it drawn up for your attorney. So you get the purchase and sale agreement, your local attorney because they know the local rules and the laws, reads through it, and then he will have a number of clauses that just don't work for us buyers, okay? And they will go through. They will do a PSA review with you, and then he will give you ideas. He will give you recommendations on what you want to change and what you want to change it to. You will have final say, but in most cases, I always go with the recommendations of the attorney, and then they'll go back and they'll negotiate it with the other attorney, and you go back and forth, and then eventually there'll be some trade-offs. You won't be able to get everything, all right, but you'll be able to get most of the things that are anti-buyer taken out of it if it's done properly with the right attorney. So you do the purchase and sale negotiation, and when that's done, then you have the main deposit that's given, which is 3 to 5% of the purchase price. Again, sometimes this deposit, the whole thing is given at the time of offer acceptance, within 48 hours, and sometimes it's split between that time and the time that the purchase and sale agreement is signed. Now, here's something interesting that you need to know. When the purchase and sale agreement is signed by both parties, okay, that's called the effective date. When the last person signs it, all right, whatever date is signed on that, that is the date that everything else falls off of. So, for instance, when you have a due diligence period of 30 days, all right, which is basically says you get to look at the property for 30 days, and if for any reason you feel that you don't want to be in this deal, you can walk away from that deal and you get your deposit back, all right? That 30 days is based off the effective date, so it's 30 days from the time that the purchase and sale agreement is signed by the last person, all right? The closing date, if they say the closing date is 60 days after the effective date, that's the date. The closing needs to take place within 60 days of the effective date. So that's a very, very important date that you need to know about. So let's go into the next thing you want to do, which is the senior debt. Now, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to use a lending broker to go out and look for the type of debt that you're going to use for your property. And the reason being is your job is to go out and get more deals, okay? The capital markets are changing on a regular basis, all right? So you want to have a good relationship with a lending broker who gets paid 1% of the lending amount of the deal and gets paid at closing. So there's no out-of-pocket money for you. But they do a lot of work. They're out there, they're doing deals on a regular basis, they're understanding the capital markets, and when you give your deal to them and say, take a look at this, find me the 3 to 5 best lenders that will do this deal, he puts it together, he packages it, and then he puts it out to the people he thinks are going to give you the best deal. He gets what's called term sheets, okay? They're about 25 to 35 pages long, okay? He reads through them all, and he says, Mr. Investor, you, these are the 5 term sheets that I've gotten. These probably are the 2 best ones, or these are the 3 best ones. Give them a read through and then let me know which one you want me to start negotiating. And those term sheets are negotiable. The lenders can say, hey, this is what we're going to offer you, interest rate, fees, etc. And you can go back and say, hey, I get your term sheet, I like it, but this is what I don't like about it, and this is what I want to negotiate. And that's what a good lending broker does for you as well. So you get the senior debt done, all right? You agree to go with one particular lender. Now, normally senior debt is done by Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, or CMBS, all right? So the easiest and the cheapest to get money from are Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. CMBS is commercial mortgage-backed securities, okay? They are very, very difficult to do business with. Sometimes you have to go that route. If you can't do Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, CMBS may be the only alternative. When that's done, you have to make sure that you have a good attorney reading through everything because they have got so many gotcha clauses in there that you want to have taken out. And sometimes, some of them they'll just refuse to take out. If you want the money, it's like tough luck, pal. If you want the money, then you've got to sign on to these clauses. So it's just very difficult. You want to avoid it as much as you can. Now you can get Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and CMBS loans as long as you are 85% occupied. Okay, 85% occupancy is called stabilization, 85 or above. If you're below 85% occupied, these lenders consider that property unstable. Okay, because it's very close to break even. All right, whether or not this property is making money. So you'll have to go to alternative financing to get into the deal, which is typically bridge loans or mezzanine financing, all right? It costs more, it's shorter terms, they usually charge you points to get these deals, but you get into it, and you fix whatever problem is at the property that's keeping the occupancy rate below stabilization, and you fix that problem, and then you refinance through Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, and you get into the long-term, lower-rate debt. Fannie Mae has a really good program right now where they'll actually do the bridge, and then they'll do the refinance into the long-term debt, and it will cost you a lot less than going from bridge to Fannie or bridge to Freddie. So keep that in mind when you're doing your deals as well. By the way, if you're doing your very first deal, the last thing you want to do is go into a deal that's not stabilized. All right, you want to do what's called a momentum play. There are two different types of properties you can get into when you're an investor. One is a momentum play, which basically means that this deal cash flows at closing. Or you can do what's called the repositioning, which means this deal's unstable, it's below 85% occupancy, and we've got to fix something before we can get it cash flowing. All right? This business will reap you a lot of rewards unless you get knocked out of this business at the very beginning. So you want to do a couple of momentum plays and get those under your belt, get your confidence, get everything working, get your team in place, and then just start building your real estate gut. And then you do a repositioning. And the reason people do repositionings is because you can make a lot more money, okay? But the reasons that people don't do repositionings or get in trouble with repositionings is because the risk is a lot higher, because you're typically taking a property with a problem and you got to fix that problem. That whole repositioning conversation is another video that we'll talk about, and I'll get that out sometime in the future. All right, so let's talk about, now that you've decided on your lender and you've got your lender application in and they've approved the loan, okay? The next thing is they're going to give you commitment requirements. All right, now also know, as this is all going on, you're getting funds from your investors into your escrow account, okay? So you're raising funds at the same time. So you get commitment requirements for the bank. Now typically the commitment requirements are some immediate repairs that may need to be done to the property prior to the closing of the deal because they're safety issues, or additional documentation that the lender needs in order for them to complete your application. Because a lot of these lenders are actually selling these applications to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and they got to check all the boxes and make sure they get all the information so they get the funding for the deal. So your commitment requirements are due, and when you get those in, that's really the next step to the actual closing of the deal. But after you get those commitments, the commitments in, or the requirements in, you get an opportunity to lock in the rate. Okay, and by locking in the rate, you pretty much secure the fact that you're going to be getting this rate at closing. Now, when we teach people how to analyze deals, and when we're analyzing our own deals, we're always analyzing at 1/4 to sometimes 0.5% above where the market is. And why is that? That's because sometimes in order to get into the rate lock, we're looking at 30, 60, sometimes 90 days, depending on the deal, and those rates could shift. So we always want a little bit of a buffer. All right, and any time, which is just about all the time, I can think of a couple of times when the rate lock really shifted on us and went high. But at any time where you can lock in that rate below from where you analyzed it, you lock that rate in. You lock it in because once you start that deal and you've locked in a rate that's lower than what you projected in your pro forma, you're already ahead of the game. You're paying out less in your principal and interest than you had pro forma because the rate's lower. So it's a good place to be. You always want to set yourself up for winning instead of the other way around. I've seen people going into deals, and it's like, if all the planets line up and it turns out to be a blue moon in any particular month, then this deal's going to work. It's like, really? That's not a good way to be investing. So the rate lock. So we just talked about the yes and no, the rate lock. So that rate lock is typically going to cost you 1% of the loan amount. Okay, so that's another additional fees that will go into that will go over to the lender. All right, and that can be taken from your actual escrow, and that will be in the private placement memorandum documentation that you can actually use funds from the escrow to get the deal closed. All right, that money will be returned to you at the closing as long as you close. If you don't close, that money will not be returned to you, so know that. So then, the next thing you do is you sign those documents and you transfer those funds. And you are on your way to closing your first deal or your very next deal. Do you remember when you got the offer accepted and it was like, oh shit, I got an offer accepted. This is exhilarating, but this is so fearful, right? Because you didn't know all the different, you knew that there was a lot of things that you needed to do before the closing, but you had never done it before. So there's a lot of anxiety in getting that first deal done. But now you've just closed your deal, and instead of, oh shit, it's, oh yeah. Oh yeah, because you just closed your first deal. In order to close that first deal, you've got to put a team together, all right? Your management company, your brokerage company, your attorney to close that deal, the property inspector. You've assembled your team to get this deal closed. You've used systems, if you were smart, you've used systems and started to implement them to get this deal closed. And now that the deal is closed, you have all the confidence in the world knowing that the system does work. And as a matter of fact, we've been teaching for 20 years. My own experience, way back in 1996, okay, is when I closed my first deal after 9 months of being total fear. All right, I finally pulled the trigger, did my first deal. Within 3 months, I had 3 more. Within 6 months, I had 9. And within the first year, I had 11 deals. And that's what we've been seeing. I mean, I didn't realize that my experience was going to be the experience of a lot of people that I was going to encounter later in life when I started my education company. But typically when you get your first deal done, the second deal comes usually within 90 days, and then the third deal, then the fourth deal, and then before you know it, you've got deals coming in and you have to work on your systems. And that's a video for another time, all the systems that you need for all of this. But the thing is, it just starts to happen fast. But the first deal is the hardest deal. And once you get over that hurdle, then opens. I like to say that the skies open up, the sun shines down, your face clears up, and your love life gets better, because it does. It's just an awesome time. You blossom like a flower. So it's about systems, team, and confidence of getting that first deal done. And here's the other thing. You get your first acquisition fee. So if you did $1 million deal and your acquisition fee it's anywhere between 3 to 5%. We always say start with 5%. And if you need that deal to work and you need to push down the acquisition fee a little bit, do that. But let's say you did $1 million deal and it's a 5% acquisition fee. That's $50,000 in your pocket at closing. How sweet is that? See you later wholesale business, right? Because not only do you get $50,000 in your pocket at the closing, but if you bought a momentum play, the very next month, you're getting your first passive income cash flow check, which is a beautiful thing. And then, as your tenants pay down your mortgage each month, the equity in your property goes up and up and up. And if you buy in an emerging market or a property that had value add, which is another video, you have this big check waiting for you somewhere in the future, which is also awesome. So it's an exciting, exciting time. And your jobs are not done yet. Closing the deal is just the beginning of Cog 3, all right, which I will do in the next video. And that is operating that deal, all right? You have become an operator. And operating is all about asset management, not about property management. I always like to say that if you become a property manager, and I find out about it, we will hunt you down and shoot you and put you out of your misery. Because property management, it should be reserved for those people, those people that really love to do it. I love those people. They're kind of odd, but they love property management and they're good at it. And for you as an investor, your job is to go out and get more deals. That's why we use a lending broker, and that's why we use property managers. But you must asset manage that deal properly to ensure that you're getting your return and your investors are getting your return. So let's talk about how to be successful, okay? Surround yourself with like-minded people, all right? When you start this journey into multifamily investing, I know when I started my journey, and I had dinner with my father every Monday night when he was alive. I remember, and I was this crazy kid that was in a rock and roll band for a number of years, and I had a lot of making up to do to my parents. And when I got out of that band and I started my real estate, first it was landscaping, and then I get into rehabs, and then I get into rehabs for banks, not flipping properties. And then I get into multifamily. And when I told my father, I was like, Dad, I'm going to start investing in multifamily properties. And he said, what, are you crazy? I said, what do you mean? He said, those tenants are going to trash your units. They're not going to pay you rent, and you're going to get foreclosed on. If you do that, you're going down. But I watched some biographies, one with Harry Helmsley from New York City. I'd read some books on it. There was not many at the time. There was one called Fortune Beneath My Feet. This is way back in the 1990s. Fortune Beneath My Feet. And I thought, yeah, that just makes complete sense to me. So I realized that I had to stop talking to my father about real estate in order for me to do my first deal, and that's what I did. Because not only would, anytime I mentioned real estate, he wouldn't even say, you're going down. He would just give me the hand signal. I was like, oh crap. So I stopped talking about him, and that's the same thing's going to happen. When you start to change, especially when you start to change for the better, okay? The people in your life that you surround yourself with, okay, they don't like change. They're where they are. You're where they are because you've surrounded yourself with people that are at the same level that you're at, okay? I'm not saying get rid of your friends, get rid of your family. What I'm saying is keep them, but also add to them and join a community of people of like-minded. That when you say I'm investing in multifamily properties, instead of them saying, you're going down, they say, me too. And this is how I'm doing it. And these are the challenges that I face. And this is how I overcome these challenges. And these are the systems that I'm putting in place. And this is what I'm doing. And see, the conversation is exciting and it spurs. And so you want to surround yourself with like-minded people. That's the most important thing. And then also, the more you learn, the more you earn. Life is one big schoolyard, you know, and you should be constantly learning about what are the things that you want to do, whether it be multifamily properties or other different types of investing. You know, you're not going to, on one video, discover a one video series of 3, discover how to invest in multifamily properties. You keep learning. You keep learning. It's actually the link below. There's a free mini course that goes in depth of what we're talking about. Feel free to click on that and go through that as well. Next, we're going to talk about cog number 3 in the next video. So we'll see you there.